Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everyone can see me okay out there. Yes? Oh, second time watching and just absolutely love this film. So I am now pleased to bring us right into our panel discussion. We are recording this portion of the event, so I know you just sat through an entire screening. If you need to use the restroom or anything, please feel free to take a little breather. We will record this and send this out to everyone in the next few days. But thank you for sticking with us because we're really looking forward to this part of the conversation. So we are thrilled to have the director and producer of the film, Cynthia Stone, with us today. Cynthia has been creating social justice documentary style pieces for nearly 3 decades. She has won multiple regional Emmy, Society of Professional Journalists, and Press Club awards. And having covered education, the environment, health, poverty, and equity issues, she's inspired to highlight people and programs finding solutions to seemingly intractable problems. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having us and you sharing the film.
It's our pleasure. And then also joining us is Dr. George Nassan. Dr. Nassan is Associate Professor of Neurology, Medical Director for the Division of Behavioral Neurology and Neuropsychiatry, Co-Medical Director of the Barbara and Maurice Dean Center for Wellness and Cognitive Health, and Vice Chair of Ambulatory Operations and Quality for the Department of Neurology. Dr. Nassan's clinical interests include dementia of all types and understanding the palliative care needs of people living with dementia and their loved ones, as well as finding interventions to alleviate the symptoms of dementia and improve the quality of life. Dr. Nassan, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
And last but not least, joining our panel is Magda Kazmarska. Magda is a teaching artist and creative aging advocate. She spent 10 years working in preclinical neuropharmacology research and over 15 years in community-based education settings in dance and creative expression. Magda aims to connect with interdisciplinary professionals at the forefront of dementia research and clinical practice to expand evidence-based creative aging programming, ensuring the longevity, expansion, and continued recognition of the field as one essential to the mental, physical, and social health of older adults globally. So thank you so much for being with us, Magda.
It's an honor and privilege. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right, well, we will dive right in because I have a feeling this hour is just going to fly by. In preparation, we said, oh, there's so many directions that we could go. But Cynthia, I was hoping you could maybe start us off because the tone of this film is one of hope, and it really brings together the actions of experts in their respective fields coming together to create solutions. So I think we're curious, what triggered the film creation for you? What trends were you noticing in the field of dementia or within your own personal life that inspired you to make this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And again, such a privilege to be here. The Global Brain Health Institute at the University of California, San Francisco is just doing really amazing work in this area. And they approached me. I've been doing television for KQED, which is a public television station here in San Francisco. And they really had, well, it started with a readers theater. They were collecting stories, oral history stories from people in the dementia field, from those experiencing dementia or caring for someone or caring or scientists or doctors in the field. And they put together this beautiful book called Hearsay, meaning, let's hear people's stories and talk about this because there's so much stigma around it and fear and people aren't talking about it. So they did a professional readers theater, and the stories were so powerful that they'd collected that they decided to make a film, and that's when they reached out to me. And when I started, other than just a dear neighbor of mine who had dementia, and people telling me, everyone I met that in possibly doing this film that they knew someone or cared for someone with dementia, I personally didn't have much experience with it until I started doing research. But midway through the filming, my mom developed dementia. I was actually filming in Brazil. and came home. And I always say that the film was kind of like a gift to me because the people in it, like Karen Diamond and Jill and Dana Walrath, the artists that you saw, really kind of shifted my perspective. They let me be with my mom in this really beautiful way, kind of letting go of fear and just being with her, you know, in the moment, really in the moment. And so yeah, it was a gift to me, and I hope that it can give that to other people who might be going through something similar.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And sticking with you just for one more moment, did you find any surprises along the way? Any kind of aha moments, whether it came to research that was being uncovered? As we know, there's constant developments in research, or perhaps interactions you saw between patients and caregivers.
Sure, sure. I think the biggest surprise for me, honestly, we probably did 100 interviews trying to narrow down the people that we ended up profiling and observing and doing all of these things. And we gathered the fellows who, the Global Brain Health Institute fellows who are from all over the world that you saw profiled in the film. There were maybe, I don't know, 50 of them in a room, or 35. And we asked them, what do you want to see in this film? And they said that the things we expected, like just how devastating it is and heartbreaking for families, and how difficult it is for caregivers. But they also said, you know, please talk about the joyful moments, the magical moments, and for someone who hadn't been yet exposed to this, I really was surprised by that. But I really did experience those moments with people, with Jill, with my own mother. And so I think that was the biggest surprise for me, that it's not this just that it's a very broad experience that takes in just that heartbreak, but also that beauty that Dana talks about.
Absolutely. And Dr. Nassan and Magda, I might put you on the spot a little here, but did you have anything that kind of surprised you from the film?
Well, first I'll give an anecdote that I actually know the majority of the fellows that are talking in the movie, because I was faculty at the Global Brain Health Institute at UCSF for about 3 years before I moved to New York. So it was quite amazing to see everybody sort of talk about their respective projects and contribution. I was there at the time when they were learning about this, so seeing the fruits of their labors and sort of the achievement that they've all done was just quite an emotional sort of a roller coaster for me. In fact, I messaged Cynthia, you know, while we were watching, and said, "You got to me," and I have tears in my eyes. So that was really quite something to see all of the work being done all over the world.
Magda, anything from you?
I've had the privilege of seeing the film a few times, but I think the thing that always surprises me is that every single time I watch this film, there are new nuggets of wisdom that I feel could in and of themselves be encapsulated as a narrative of a new way that we can shift our perspective, right? Nothing in life is just flat and only has one side to a story. And I think this film really beautifully opens up an opportunity for us to see this experience and perhaps even develop a way of looking and listening that helps us perceive other experiences through multifaceted approaches.
Yeah, I think you're so right about every time you watch it, you pick up on something. This was my second time watching the film, and I picked up something I hadn't picked up the first time, which was actually about the hidden disability and the airport scene. And just wondering if any of you have any comments on that, or maybe you can elaborate on that even further. Maybe there's been further progress, but that seems like a real practical tip that I thought, wow, this is something good for people to know about and take advantage of that resource.
Yeah, Helen was telling me, she told me so many times before we decided to shoot that scene how frustrating it is that just people don't understand when you have dementia, that, you know, you might just need something really simple, like someone to walk you through an airport, and how everybody assumes you'll need a wheelchair. And so we kind of shot it and thought, well, let's see what happens here. And there's one moment in the film where you can see Helen looking at Ronan Fox, our photographer, you know, and her little look is like, I told you so, because he's wheeling over the wheelchair. So yeah, there are, you know, there are things that we can do in society to make it a more inclusive environment. And I think we should really work to do that.
Absolutely. I think everyone can agree the airport can be overwhelming to anyone.
Yes,
So
that's true.
there are resources like that. This is helpful. So I'd like to shift a little bit. There are some really surprising facts that come up in the film. One of those being that some cases of dementia, we can prevent some of those cases possibly. And so Dr. Nassan, I'm wondering what you would like the audience to understand about modifiable risk factors when it comes to brain health. Are there powerful places where people can start paying attention to their daily habits that can help?
Yeah, Dr. Bruce Miller said it really best in the movie. I think he was enumerating a number of health risk factors that are known to be risks for dementia, you know, including things like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, um, isolation, lack of social interaction, so on and so forth, lack of physical exercise. These are things that really are accessible and more or less, you know, easy to fix, in the sense that, you know, we just need, you know, a plan and sort of a way to make sure that we maybe work with our you know, public health colleagues and internal medicine colleagues, so on and so forth, in order to improve the state of well-being and the health of people generally. And I think all the risk factors that we have known about, cardiac risk factor or whatever, also apply to the brain. So, I mean, these are things that at any age, people can start talking about with their primary care providers, internal medicine providers, so on and so forth, and start coming up with plans to get healthy and stay healthy.
Fantastic. And on a practical level, since you sort of started alluding to it, do you have suggestions for the audience on the right time to go through cognitive testing, or perhaps there's signs to look out for where you might recommend that it's done sooner rather than later?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The brain is tricky and in some way elusive, and I think it doesn't love being observed or monitored too much. So sometimes trying too hard to pick up on a cognitive difficulty or challenge when you don't have one, you know, can in and by itself start creating some sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of actually having cognitive problems. And you know, my general advice to people is, if you notice anything unusual or out of the ordinary or different from like your state of being or your sort of like personality, a good place to start is to talk about it to your primary care physician, to see whether this is something that is in and by itself concerning or worrisome, or maybe it's coming from something else in your life, you know, something stressful, so on and so forth, or something medical that is easily fixable, a vitamin deficiency, something else. And then if there is reasons to be concerned, you know, then people can get a formal evaluation with a neuropsychologist or a neurologist, you know, in order to sort of start understanding, you know, what they are dealing with. In general terms, it's hard to tell people who really don't have any cognitive challenge to monitor themselves, because observing the brain in and by itself becomes intrusive to the brain function, if that makes sense. And we don't necessarily want people to sort of be walking around all the time feeling anxious about, oh, is this something I forgot? We all have different weaknesses and strength in our brains, and that's okay. You know, that's what makes us all very different from each other. We're not all we don't all memorize in the same way, or, you know, love remembering things. We're not all as eloquent in speaking, you know, or similar to each other. Not all of us have the same sort of visual, artistic, you know, ways of doing things, and that makes us richer, and that's fine. And we don't want to start finding fault or we don't want to start finding these weaknesses as being a sign of disease or a sign of something, you know, imminent that's going to happen.
And it'll be interesting to see with all of this development of AI support, how much or little we're relying on our own memory to kind of get through. I mean, I feel like even in the medical field, you'll see a doctor pull out their phone to go through a list of different, prescription types or something. And I'm thinking, a few years ago, that was probably right up here. And now we have the support that we need from it in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll tell you an anecdote on that topic. I think we are already machine learners. We just don't know that we are. Our brains are doing way more than we think they are doing, and we don't give them enough credit. If you take any specialist in their own field, when they have a gut feeling or when they have like some sort of like idea about something and then it turns out to be true, which is really more often than not, it's probably because of like a lot of machine learning work in the sense that their brain has been exposed to their work for years and years and years and have seen a lot of things. So like when now you're in a new situation, your brain is already processing that and saying, you know what, I've seen this in these 5 other times, and that's what I think is going to be, and gives you that quote unquote gut feeling. We just need to like trust that that's the case. Now, obviously, if that's not our specialty and we have a gut feeling about something, random, that's probably not what I'm talking about. But a gut feeling in a specialist is actually the brain saying, I've seen this before, and I believe it could be that, and you should go down that route of proving it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll direct this one that's still in science world towards Dr. Nassan, but then Cynthia and Magda, please feel free to jump in if you have some thoughts or opinion on this, because there's been an excitement in the medical field over the past year, really, but maybe past several years, on the development of new drugs that target the development of Alzheimer's disease. So can you speak to how the development of new medicines that will hopefully support dementia-related disease can coexist with the wonderful therapies that are showcased in the film?
Yes, I'm feeling very optimistic about all of these new opportunities for new therapeutics and disease-modifying drug. Disease-modifying means that it's a medication that changes the timeline and the course of the disease and not only addresses symptoms. Like the new medication that was approved last year, being one of them, like lecanemab. I think these have to coexist with everything else that we are doing. I wish we were there, but we're still not at a point where we can cure Alzheimer's disease, and for that matter, other dementias. I mean, Alzheimer's disease is only one type of disease that causes dementia. There are many others for which we don't yet have any similar drugs. So while it's a great beginning of a new chapter in the story of dementia, we are still at a point where we are unfortunately going to have people who develop dementia, and it's going to progress over time, and they're going to lose some of their prior faculties, and maybe, as we saw in the movie, gain some new ones or be surprised by some new things that's going to happen. And therefore all of these effort that are happening to improve the well-being and the quality of life of people living with dementia is absolutely crucial, as crucial today as it was before the development of these medications.
Magda, Cynthia, do you have anything to add to that?
Cynthia, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I disagree with that wholeheartly. That from Bruce Miller too. You also hear he's very kind of optimistic, guardedly optimistic, but that really focusing on these risk factors and things that can really keep our brains healthy, and or even after diagnosis that can keep our brains as healthy as long as possible are really important to focus on.
Yeah, I agree. I'll just add 2 things. One of kind of highlighting the words of 2 of my mentors in the fellowship and also leaders of the Global Brain Health Institute. So one is Dr. Valcour, who was bringing our attention to the social determinants of health and thinking about the fact that while we're developing and putting focus into disease-modifying drugs, that there are people who are already living with dementia, and there will be people who will develop this condition. And it is our responsibility to ensure that we create an ecosystems that help support them. Because even if we think about, for instance, heart disease, which I think Dr. Rian Robertson mentioned, as a good comparison, when we think about brain health and heart health, we all accept the fact that right now we might take statins, we might take various disease modifying drugs for our heart conditions, but that doesn't mean that we don't also think about our nutrition, about physical exercise, about being outside in nature, about our diet. All of these things not only reduce our risk factors, so we're focusing on prevention, so we're not even having to perhaps reach that point of a really heavy experience with that condition, or we can delay the onset, and also we can increase the quality of life outside of the clinical space, which I think is also really important.
Absolutely. Well, sticking with Magda for a moment, in your experience in this field as a dance and artist and an advocate, what have you seen from a behavioral or mindset perspective that pushes those diagnosed with dementia to continue the hobbies that they love? I mean, we saw these surfers who had said they've been doing it for 30 plus years, and then on top of that, what is your thought and what have you seen in the field as far as success of trying other things as well, and what that does for empowerment and cognitive health?
I think that's an excellent question. And I, as somebody who works as a dance artist with elders and with people with neurodegenerative condition, I always get this question: how do you get people engaged if they don't want to dance? And I might answer something that maybe is a little, maybe not what you're expecting to say. I say, if you really don't want to dance, don't dance. Because there are a lot of other wonderful things out there that might be your thing. But one thing I will say is that I will encourage people to take a risk and try it first, because you may not know. You may not know. And I've had a lot of experiences of people trying something and surprising themselves. Because the reasons why we haven't tried something may not be that we don't like it, but somebody when we were 5 years old told us that we don't have a dancer's body, and so we shouldn't dance. Or we might have danced professionally previously, and now we feel that we are not dancing in the same way. And so we're having to create a new relationship with our experience of dance. But there are also a lot of other art forms out there. I think what is really critical here is an environment, is the kind of environment that we create. And I use this word a lot, but I think responsibility is one that comes to mind for me. Dr. Kennelly mentions it. One of the most important things, most important interventions is not necessarily to people who are living with dementia, but to the rest of us. I think we as a society have a responsibility to ensure that we cultivate spaces that encourage people as they progress through different chapters of their life, be it aging or be a neurodegenerative condition, that we normalize making new friends, that we know that there are spaces where we can discover a new habit, a new talent, be comfortable taking risks. And that shouldn't have to come from those individuals who are very extroverted and are always going to go, but also create spaces where somebody who is a little shyer can feel welcome, can witness their peers try something and succeed, and say, well, maybe I'll give it a shot too. Because I think there's a lot more of those types of people out there than those that will come forward and be the risk takers.
And how, this is sort of for everyone on the panel, how important is it, especially relating to cognitive health, to pick something that the individual is going to stick with? Or is there more a mindset of kind of experimenting and trying with a lot of things? Or is it really important to kind of land on dance, for instance, or art, as this is something I'm really going to progress through? This is like a comfort zone that I can lean on.
I would say both, a little bit of both. I think from a brain health perspective, we know that one of the things that supports neuroplasticity is constant enrichment. But enrichment doesn't necessarily mean that we always have to try something completely novel. It might just mean doing something in a new way. and challenging ourselves to not fall into that machine learning, that muscle memory, so to speak, but putting ourselves in a position to try something. But I also think that there's a certain level of balance between novelty and like as a positive stress, and novelty as a negative stress that puts you beyond your comfort zone and actually sets you back. And I think trusting and initially working with facilitators who can create and cultivate that environment for you until you develop enough of an agency and understanding in your own ability and what you can and cannot do, that you can become that director, right? I think of, in this space, I think about being an ally. Like I think of myself as a facilitator and an ally to individuals because I'm not living with dementia, but I can create and work with people to develop a sense of curiosity and a sense of agency and new directions that people want to go, and then step away. I think that's the best case scenario when we can create those environments for other people.
And I feel like one of the takeaways I'm getting from this is also just having the willingness to try something that might not be the right fit. And that's okay. So like, I don't want to use the term failure, but just being open to like, I'm just going to try a few different things, knowing that I'm not going to land on every single one of these, and that's okay. But it might open the doors, like you said, to something completely amazing that I, from the past, thought I could never do. And now I'm really connecting with it at this stage in my life. Cynthia, did you have something else to add there?
Thanks. I was just going to say that I think it's so individual too. For instance, the woman who's doing the Catherine Jordan, who was studying what's happening in the brain with music, she had this therapy that she was doing with people where she would develop a music playlist based on the person's interest between, say, 18 and 25, their favorite songs or favorite music from that particular time. And then she would have them listen to that music. So, and Karen Diamond told a story, she's the playwright in the film, where there was a woman who was completely unresponsive for months and months. And when she was doing research and Karen was saying, what is this person like? What's their history? And the people in the care home didn't even really know much about her. And then she said, really, you have to know something about her. And so they came in the next day and said, oh, we found something. We found them something. She lived down the docks in Cardiff. And it was a very multicultural area in Cardiff. And so Karen said, okay, I've got it. So she comes and she brings in some Bob Marley the next day and she plays this for the woman. And the woman just like, awakens, gets up, starts kind of dancing in the middle of the room, hugs Karen, said, thank you. And so we don't know if it'll be art or music, or maybe it'll be nothing, but there might be something to find that key, which is what Karen says at the end, that just might tap into that person that might make a difference. I know for Jill, it was music with Dawn, and we don't know what it'll be, but finding out is worth a try, I think.
Yes, I love that. So I just want to go ahead and remind everyone that our hope is to shift to a Q&A in about 10-15 minutes. I haven't seen many questions come through yet, and I know there's got to be questions out there in the audience. So feel free to go ahead and type those questions into the chat, and we'll get to those in just a little bit. So it's mentioned in the film, actually, right at the beginning, about isolation, and that those diagnosed with dementia, that this is a possible worry, that you could fall into isolation with the worry of what is to come. And so I'm wondering about, this is for everyone, what have you seen in your work in furthering outreach and programs to know those that need support the most and those possibly suffering from isolation? How are we getting to those folks? How are we pulling them into some of these wonderful programs that are showcased?
Magda, do you want to take that one, or you're doing one yourself, right? So you're involved in that.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed. There's several different approaches to this, and I think obviously, at 90-Second Why, you are running the program for cognitive strength and ability. I run ongoing dance programs online and in person in collaboration with different community spaces here as well as in California. But I think when it comes to isolation, I think it's a bigger problem. And I actually think of isolation as a shortcoming of the rest of us. I think about this often. I clearly this is a habit of my thinking, but I do think about kind of the narratives that we tell ourselves about how we interact, and kind of whether we accept as a norm that we are interdependent as a species, as a society, and that we normalize those. Because I think what tends to happen is that as people might get older, or especially in the case of the diagnosis of dementia, where we have stigma, we see empirically that people's networks start to shrink. People don't know how to respond. We have stigma. We don't know how to talk about it. And this is, I think, why we need to create spaces. And when we publicize about these spaces, once we create that space of trust, which is a huge investment from those individuals, right? There's a lot of courage and willingness and openness and trust that they bring to us, that we continue those spaces. And then those people end up modeling for others that this is something that they can trust and turn to, that this is the new norm. And that initially happens with groups like 90-Second Why and other organizations consistently showing up. But ultimately, I think it's a long time marathon where we as a society accept that all of us can serve a role. We can. I've been working right now as an anecdote, since we're sharing anecdotes. I'm currently in the final stages of a pilot research project. As an Atlantic Fellow for Equity and Brain Health, we have the ability to apply for some research, and I was really honored to receive a pilot award for brain health leaders, which allowed myself and my peers to run an online dance program and to run a research study to evaluate well-being and sense of belonging from folks. And I think one of the biggest aha moments for me was how transformative it was for people, and how they themselves started to be the anchors and support for one another. I have one quote that I think was really, really kind of critical. Over three months, this one individual said that they came weighed down. They entered into the program weighed down with the diagnosis, because they had just recently, within 6 months to a year, received the diagnosis. And now this person said that I'm in a better place. Actually, I'm going to say their words exactly than when I first started. But the condition hasn't lightened, but my attitude towards it has. And I don't want to. I mean, I really don't think that was so much me or the program. I think it was the fact that we had a space where people got to do that for one another, and it wasn't implicit that that everybody was living with a diagnosis. That wasn't implicit in the program. We very rarely talked about it unless somebody brought it into the conversation. But all of the other things that come up, people talked about anxiety, the fact that over the course of this hour, this one person who had really high anxiety shared that they were able to let go of their fear for that 1 hour a week. That, I think, helps people feel really good. They start to notice that there's something beyond the diagnosis too, and that it is and can be joyful. But when we know that in our bodies, I think it makes a completely different difference than when somebody tells us, oh yes, this is possible.
Thank you for that. That's such very hopeful message. And Dr. Nassan, I'm wondering if you, in the medical world, if you're seeing an increase perhaps in resources. Is that something that's being talked about within the doctor's office, or is it still really kind of community based? Just wondering how these things are all intersecting.
I think there is more and more education around this, which is truly wonderful to see, because probably even as early as maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, this wasn't necessarily a topic, that is at the core of medical education. But more and more social determinants of health, are a big part of education, including isolation, as being one of these. I think there's more and more seminars and conversations, that are occurring and how to handle this challenge. I'm hopeful that this will spark more and more, hopefully funded work, be it research or other types of sort of like community projects, so on and so forth, in order to address this. And, there are multiple partners in the community, such as yourselves, and others who are already tackling this. And I think leveraging and supporting these programs is going to be important. So I'm truly hopeful that we're moving in the direction of trying to address, social isolation as a really important factor, and not just dementia, but probably multiple other sort of health conditions.
Absolutely. I mean, seeing the wave of social prescription that's starting to take on, and, really kind of getting physicians and medical professionals involved in this is something you should be looking into. That's not necessarily just a pill or going to the gym, but it's like going to a dance performance and getting out into the world. I think that'll be really interesting to see how that develops. Cynthia, you had something?
Yeah, I was just going to bring it down to what each of us can do. So many of us know someone who has dementia, and one of the really big problems is that, people don't know how to act around it, and so they kind of abandon old friends, and they're not trying to be mean, unkind. They just don't really know what to do. But just being comfortable being present with someone, I think is so important. Or I have a friend, Magda's heard the story before, but her husband has dementia, and she found a professor at a community college who was he's a photography professor, and her husband loved photography so much, and she was exhausted. She needed some respite. So she contacted this professor and said, would you be open to spending a day with my husband? And they would, once a week, they would walk around San Francisco taking photographs and coming back and manipulating them on the computer. So if each of us has something to give, and if we can provide that respite for someone, just being with someone or doing something that they enjoy, even if they can't fully participate, but can just be, enjoying being out and giving that caretaker some respite, I think is really important.
Yes. All right, so we'll shift again, another one for the entire group, so feel free to chime in. Are you seeing improvements at all in the stigma attached to cognitive decline? It seems like from the film, more and more people are speaking out, and really becoming participants and advocates for themselves within the community. Do you see that happening more and more as a result of the film, perhaps? Or we're just curious to hear where we're at with the stigma that is sometimes attached to going through something like cognitive decline.
Well, that's what the film was supposed to do, and we're just at the beginning stages of getting it out, and I really hope it does have that kind of impact for people. I just, so many people are impacted by it, and there's still a lot of fear, and so I hope we can start talking. And that's why the film is really to be a tool to start conversations and to get people connected to resources, and in that effort to try to lessen that. I think there are other cultures that are a little further along in this journey than we are. So I hope we can, I hope we can normalize it and destigmatize it, and really start to talk about it and help each other and lessen the fear around it a little bit.
Anyone else?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And the Global Brain Health Institute is housed at Trinity College Dublin and UCSF, right? So both Ireland and the United States are in more affluent countries. And I think it's hard for us, even living in the United States, where we know that there are rural areas and there's a lot of disparities and a lot of inequity, even in this country. I think it's hard for us to fathom that outside of this country, and especially in the global south and the lower middle income countries, there is a very, very different experience for people who are living with dementia and care partners. There's really no early diagnosis. There's a humongous stigma. Like you can hear Lingani mention, what's the experience like in sub-Saharan Africa for some people who are living with dementia. So I think part of the vision and the intention of the Global Brain Health Institute is to speak it to that space for us as a global community to step in and see what we can do to support and work with the individuals in those communities to develop change. Initially, perhaps inspired by some of these best practices that have been developed in UK and Ireland and Northern Europe and in the US. But I think advocacy is absolutely critical, and part of the work that I've had the privilege of stepping into is working at the United Nations level and working with advocates and learning more and more that people who are in these policy spaces are recognizing that the best way to move forward is to encourage and invite lived experience experts. So in this case, people like Helen who are living with dementia, because they are the expert. There are a lot of different experts, but they are definitely one, and a voice that none of the rest of us can really speak to. And I'm privileged to serve on the board of one of those organizations here in the United States, the Dementia Action Alliance. They've been active in advocacy for 25 years. And but the truth is that there's a lot more there. And whether it's in a local level, and a statewide level, or at the White House, and Capitol Hill, there's a lot of advocacy can happen. And as Cynthia mentioned, you can even be an advocate within your own community. If you've watched this film, this is an opportunity for you to have a conversation with somebody, because you'll never, I think as soon as the experience of dementia is one that as soon as you start to have those conversations, all of a sudden people will appear in your periphery that you didn't know or had perhaps experienced this. And that already is helping transform the ecosystem and environment that we live in, the stigma that we live in.
Yeah, I thought it was so powerful to see somebody going through dementia to be their own advocate, to be attending conferences and speaking at those conferences, because to show, yes, we can all advocate and help, and you know what, as the person going through it, I can also be a part of that. And I thought that was really brave and really powerful. So I want to shift into a really important topic, which is that of caregivers, which was a really powerful storyline throughout the entire film, and of course, a very critical role. Cynthia, you mentioned that Jill Harmon, who was in the film, has really nice takeaways that she's shared in the past for how caregivers can take care of themselves. And I'd love if you could dive into some of those tips.
Yeah, sure. I have the extreme pleasure of doing some of these with Jill Harmon, and she was the woman in the film who was caring for her husband Don so beautifully, and she really she would want you to know, to mostly if you're caring for someone, to really take care of yourself. If you can go to a counselor, or if you can find a support group, to really do that. It's hard for people to ask for help, so Jill would say, please take advantage when somebody asks you if they can help you, so you can have a little respite. And she'd say to be specific, tell them, it would really help me if you could just be with Don a couple of hours so I can go out, or she said, just be very specific with what you need. she would say to try to have humor and to go where that person is going, because well, she loves to tell the story that Don, at some point, they've been married, I don't know, 30 years, and in dementia he started calling her Wanda. She'd just say Wanda this and Wanda that, and instead of getting upset and correcting him, and she just went with it, and she just said, oh, Wanda. She just, so she found humor in things, and she did just, wherever Don went kind of with his mind and his experience, she would just follow along with him. That, just to say it's not their fault, that they're doing the best that they can, and just not to correct all the time, but to find, I loved how in the film, one of the women in the theater production, you said, tells her husband that she has a job for him. I don't know, some people might not feel okay about that. It's a little bit of a fib, but it makes his life easier and hers. And yeah, and so just things like that, just to, one thing big for Jill was dignity for Dawn. She'd have these spa days where she would, you know, cut his hair and give him a shave, and he always looked very dapper, and she would cut the back of his own clothes so that he wouldn't have to be in gowns, but would be wearing his own clothes that he liked. And so, just things like that.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Nassan, maybe you can talk a little bit about the growth opportunity for caregivers and how, of course, we want our caregivers to take care of themselves and be present in the moment, but how do they, when being so focused on someone else, how can they continue their own life journey?
This is such an important topic, really it is. And I want to preface by saying, like, anything that I know about this topic, I've learned from my patients and their, loved ones and their families. And I'm in a constant awe of what people go through, when dementia enters their life. The documentary is wonderful and shows, snapshots of a lot of inspiring and sort of joyful moments. And I can only imagine that before these snapshots, maybe at a time when Cynthia wasn't able to capture them yet, caregiver might have went through something that was very painful, and there was a lot of suffering and a lot of things that they had to go through to sort of get to where they are right now. And perhaps the first thing to say is that's okay. I mean, this is hard and difficult, and most likely the most difficult thing that any person is ever going to have to go through when they're taking care of a loved one who is slowly losing various abilities, disappearing, in one way or another. So first and foremost, it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to not know what you're doing, and all of that stuff. And I think that's probably the path and the journey that will eventually get people into a place where they can start finding these nuggets of, joy and the way of doing things that is different. I think there's a lot of importance to this caregiver growth concept, and I think more and more, in the medical field, we are trying to help support our caregivers through really an approach that includes not just the physician taking care of somebody who's living with dementia, but also, the social workers on the team, the nurses, other caregivers who volunteer and sort of teach each other, community programs, support groups, organizations, so on and so forth. It takes a village. I'm remembering an example of a patient of mine that I had seen many years ago, and his wife, who was taking really a wonderful care of him, and after it became much more challenging to do that at home, they did move to a facility, and she started, while taking care of him, she started also sort of hanging out a little bit more with her friends, and maybe meeting some new people, so on and so forth. And she told me how, while that was very good for her, it makes her feel a little bit guilty that she was walking more and more towards the light in her own life, because she was sort of coming over that grief and finding ways to sort of find balance in her life while she observed him walking more and more towards the dark. That's really kind of the image that she gave me. And it really stayed with me in the sense that that's kind of what happens. And perhaps it's okay to observe that and to allow, a disease to take over a loved one while we are growing and going past it and sort of continuing with our life while doing a good job taking care of them.
Yeah, growing in different ways. Magda, Cynthia, do you have anything else to add to that?
I thought that was a really beautiful description, and I just, yeah, I don't mean at all to sound Pollyannish. It's just such a heartbreaking and difficult thing for anyone to go through. And Jill, too, you hear her say in the film how low she got, and so yeah, it's such a difficult journey, and yeah, only that.
Well, and I think, Cynthia, like you said, like Jill had said, being specific about what you need. And I think about, a place like the 92nd Street Y, where we really take our cues from the community. And so I'd tell anybody, like wherever you are in the world, to, if you are connected to an organization like a community center, maybe vocalizing, hey, here's a suggestion. Have you ever, we do that all the time at the 92nd Street Y. We get a great suggestion and we say, let's make this happen. And we actually have a caregiver series that we host. But yeah, I think going back to that tip of being specific and not being afraid to ask, because people will rally when they know what others need.
Yeah, I think I will add that the best, all I know about being a care partner to somebody living with dementia has been through the generosity of the people who I've met. I've been a care partner for an aging grandmother, but it's a different situation. And I learned from what I learned from some of these individuals is that every story is different. I'm thinking in particular about one remarkable care partner who now continues to be, actually two who continue to be friends. And kind of like Dana in the film, they're both incredibly creative individuals who brought their sense of creativity and curiosity into the experience of being a care partner. And they both attribute that approach as making that experience really impactful. Not to, again, nothing in life is always cheery. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that even the difficult aspects of life can get us to something different. So not to shy away from that and not to say that that doesn't exist. But that perspective of curiosity and bringing a creative lens into, okay, this is a creative conundrum. How can we work through this? I think is a really helpful mindset. And how can we help and support people in cultivating that? How can we show examples of that? And then the other thing I think is not one thing I hear. I work a lot in Poland right now. One of the gifts of being a part of the Global Brain Health Institute that I'm able to work with my colleagues in Poland, where I'm originally from Poland, to help support, build, and implement some of these things there. And that has been one of the most rewarding gifts of the fellowship for me. And what I'm noticing and hearing from people there is Poland doesn't have a national dementia plan, although neither does the United States. And it doesn't, there aren't really as many structures in place. And there isn't really a lot of public conversation about dementia. And so the people that we're meeting who are care partners found their path themselves. They did the research, and the ones who speak English did research on English speaking programs and then brought them and implemented them. The level of resiliency and innovation that each of these individuals brought is just profound and mind-boggling to me. But they shouldn't have to do that. I think it is again, coming back, this is my thing today. It's our responsibility to show these things. UCSF does a phenomenal program called the Care Ecosystem, where as soon as somebody receives a diagnosis, there is somebody there who is walking with you every step of the way. So you don't have to, on top of the things that you're going through that are difficult, have to do the research yourself. For some people, doing that research is going to be the thing that's going to build the resiliency. But some people really would benefit. I think a lot of people would benefit from having somebody signpost, like Helen said, giving signposts of what are some examples of things others have done. Try this out, and maybe you'll find something new. That I think is absolutely critical. We can't leave people to do this on their own. And the truth is they don't. There are programs out there that exist. How can we get more people to connect to them?
Absolutely. So we're gonna start to wind down here. I'd just love to sneak in one last question for all of you, and this is just a quick one but important, which is, with your expertise, what is a key takeaway that you would love for the audience, whether it's a practical tip or something that you experienced from the film or just something from your own field? But again, this film has such a note of hope to it, and I'd love to just get one last bit of hopefulness from each of you on a key and practical takeaway. Starting with whoever would like to start.
Go ahead, you start, Dr. Nassar.
I was actually going to just start by saying thank you to Cynthia and her team for making this documentary and putting it out there. It's really important to tell these stories, and it was such an inspiring movie to watch, even for somebody who is in this field. And I cannot be more grateful, for all the hard work that went into doing this. And also thank you for the 92Y for sort of really recognizing the importance of this and putting on this event. And I just want to say that, like, maybe similar to the people and the characters and the stories that we just saw, I truly believe that every person has their own story. It may not look exactly like what we just witnessed on the film, and there might be very different aspects to it, but there is a lot of joy to be had, despite or in spite or whatever we want to call it, conditions that bring with them also challenging times and suffering and pain. Even within all of that, there is so many other stories of joy, to be had. And I if everybody can sort of keep sight of that and know that, time is going and will bring with it sort of new things and changing things and sort of joyful stuff, then maybe everybody can feel a little bit less pain, as they go through this experience.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really the essence of what we are trying to show. And I guess it would just be that that I think there is a lot we can do, each of us can do, in terms of prevention, about taking care of our own brain health and connecting with those who we love, who we're taking care of, to, just create a more a situation that's kind of full of love and challenging for sure, heartbreaking for sure, but a lot we can do to connect, to be with. I remember Dana telling me once, the artists, we get so bound up in these labels that we have. I'm a daughter, I'm a husband, but I remember being with my mom, and she didn't know who I was, and we would be reading together, on her bed, and reading and listening to music, and she would turn to me and say, "Who are you again?" And I don't know, it got to a point where it didn't matter that she didn't know I was her daughter. We just tried to be in the moment. That's another thing Jill would say, is that, it's something that really teaches you to be absolutely in the moment with the person you are in. And I guess that was a really helpful thing for me when I was going through it with my mom.
Being human with one another, I think, is a really beautiful takeaway. Being willing to see the beauty in another person just as they are. I think we saw some beautiful exemplars of that. I keep thinking about Jeanette. I fell in love with Jeanette. The fact that we we all crave to know that we matter, that we belong, and that we can connect with others and that others want to connect with us. And I saw that just exemplified so beautifully through the stories and this film. I think the two kind of takeaways that I'll have, because I know the film talks both about brain health and dementia. I think the first one is that it's never too early and never too late to take action about brain health, that our brains are changing from the time we're born to the time that we leave this earth. And that there are a lot of things that we can do, and we don't have to wait around, but we can take those actions. And the next one is something that I'm learning constantly from working and meeting beautiful and incredible people living with dementia, is that, and actually learning about research that is corroborating this, that even in the face of the diagnosis or receiving a diagnosis of dementia, that's not the end of a chapter, it's only the beginning, that you can not only live but thrive with dementia. And that there are many people who have walked this journey, who are walking this journey, and who will continue to walk this journey with you, that you're not alone.
Thank you so much for that, for everyone. So we are about to wrap up. There is one question in particular that came in through the audience that I think might be nice for maybe Dr. Nassan, you'll be able to address this, although we can't be specific because we don't know the parameters around this. But they're asking if they, I'm not sure if they're a caregiver or a friend, but they have a sense that someone in their life is suffering from dementia. They're asking, is it better that they have that conversation with the individual about that? How forward should they be in kind of nudging them towards the doctor's office?
That's important and very tricky. And as you point out, I think it depends on the situation. I'm not sure that there's one way of doing this, and it may depend on that person's personality, the relationship between us and that person, but also sort of where they are, how early or not it is. Sometimes depending on if it's early but the insight is not there versus it's not early but the insight is there, a lot of things can be different. I would say that sometimes if we are listening and to Cynthia's point, if we are in the moment and present, the people who are suffering from this kind of tell us what is the right answer. And in a way, we would know that, okay, if we're going to say these or try to insist to say, you have dementia or put a label on it, that's going to create anxiety or something more challenging than sort of just let it be and being in the moment with them in a different way. Or if it's about trying to get them to the doctor, then find some other way to go to the doctor. Oh, let's go do our general checkups together. We'll both see the doctor, see if we're doing fine or whatever, depending on the situation. And if we're in the moment together and it feels like it is a good moment to be able to sort of have a conversation that's around, a serious label or a serious disease, and saying it isn't going to create any sort of anxiety or what have you, then maybe it's okay to say that. So I think it goes back to really such an important lesson that Cynthia's teaching us, which is try to be in the moment with your loved one, and oftentimes the answers will come just in that.
Thank you so much. What a good way to wrap everything up. I want to thank Cynthia and Magda and Dr. Nassan for all of your amazing insights this evening. It was really incredible having your time here with us. And we did get a few questions that came through about possibly purchasing the film to watch on their own. So I'll go ahead and make sure that all of that information is available in our post-event communication when we send out the recording as well. So we'll have all of that information ready for all of our participants. At the beginning, I did not forget to mention, but we're very happy that Mount Sinai is a sponsor of the Spark Your Health Talk series. So we'd like to thank them for all of their support. And of course, this was wonderful to collaborate with our very own 92nd Street Y program for cognitive strength and ability, which I have had the pleasure of speaking in and seeing the tremendous growth of that program. So it's really exciting and novel work being done. And I hope that everyone on will join us for a future Spark Your Health Talk. And I look forward to sending out the recording of this panel discussion in several days. But thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for sticking around with us since 5:30 Eastern Standard Time. We really appreciate it. We know it was worth it, though. And stay well.